We've been spending a lot of time looking at the best and worst weapons of Halo, best and worst maps from each Halo game, and best and worst vehicles from each Halo game. But when it comes down to the individual campaign levels, it's kind of a different type of experience to judge. It's something that when we play more and more Halo, when we do videos on this channel, we start to get newer opinions as we go along. Sometimes we do really tedious challenges, and we start to notice smaller nuances which are either more annoying or other parts that are really fun to play that maybe we didn't appreciate the first time around. So we thought it'd be really interesting if we went ahead and made a tier list based off of our opinions of each Halo campaign level from all of the main first-person shooter titles. Now, of course, this is our own personal opinions. Luke and I debated. We figured out our lists and how we wanted to rank these levels if we did a tier list. So which levels are the best? Which ones are trash? Let's take a look. We're going to go ahead and approach this list in a chronological order based on where they take place in the Halo timeline. Halo Reach kicks off with Winter Contingency. And while this level's not the worst, there is a really epic mid to end part of this level. The first part's really just a lot of walking and kind of driving around and waiting around, and it's not the worst level, but it's definitely not the most amazing level Reach has to offer, so we're going to put this one just at B tier. Sword Base, on the other hand, is a welcome change of pace. Things are right away an upbeat battle. There's some cool driving sections. You get to explore a little bit in a more open sandbox. But then you still have some cooler close quarter sections towards the end of the level with some awesome aerial fighting that you do defending a base, which is just kind of unique here. We're gonna go ahead and put this one up to B tier. Nightfall was another solid level. We had those giant things that were introduced that were supposed to be in the original Halo, which was cool to finally see all these years later. But there's some cool elements of stealth. There's some interesting sniping mechanics, though we do wish there was a little more sniping that could be involved. You get to use a forklift if you want, and while this definitely doesn't stand as one of the most amazing or groundbreaking Halo levels or Halo experiences, it's still fun, so we're gonna put it in at B tier as well. However, the next level is really awesome. It seems to take a lot of those elements of having more of an open sandbox where you can approach combat whatever way you want, but also kind of refines the moments, so you have these awesome parts in your gameplay, and Tip of the Spear definitely is one of those levels that just kind of has the full Halo package. You get to drive around, you get to take out some stuff, and then you have this giant spire that kind of leads up to this awesome midway point in the game, and this one easily gets A tier here. There's no real surprise why when MCC decided to add Reach in, Tip of the Spear was the level that they tested out and showed off first out of any other level in Reach. And this next level is where everyone's going to get upset and disagree with us. However, we have a strong opinion on this one. We are not fans of Long Night of Solace. Honestly, while we do think the space mechanics were a cool idea, they just seem to drag out way too long. They're not exciting enough. You can play through it once and have a really good time, but when you keep revisiting the level, it's so tedious just having to do the space section, and then the parts before and after it don't offer anything exciting enough to really make us want to jump in and play the level. The first time through, the level works okay. Anytime you replay the game, we are just kind of dreading playing this level, especially how long it is, so we're gonna put this one down at D tier. Then on the other hand, Exodus is a great change of pace. You get to face off against brutes for the first time in Reach. You get to see a more urban area in not only Halo Reach, but it's always welcome whenever we get to play a Halo game that takes place in a more populated area, whenever you have those levels here and there, and Exodus is a good example of it. Plus you get to use a jetpack here alongside some ODSTs, which is kind of fun as well. So we're gonna go ahead and elevate this level all the way up to A tier. Though we do have one level that we thought is even better than Exodus, and it's New Alexandria. This level was very unique, and it's definitely one of those points when you think about all of the campaign levels of Halo Reach that stands out, as not only was this level unique in its atmosphere, but it also had a very unique style where you have different objectives you can fly in that are kind of randomly brought onto the player, which makes each playthrough different and unique, which is kind of cool. And just being able to fly in the Falcon, going point to point, there's a ton of hidden references along the way, some really cool Easter eggs. We just really love this level, and we think it deserves to be in the S tier, and the first level in this list so far that's going to be sitting up there in S tier. Next we go back to the package, which does obviously reuse a lot of the sword base level. However, there is the really awesome firefight section at the end, and while this level definitely is the most unique level in Reach, it's still fun, so we're gonna put it in a B tier. And then we go on to Pillar of Autumn, which is kind of this final culmination, and Bungie did a really good job at building up the climax of this game without necessarily repeating tropes they've done in previous Halo games, and that's something that does make this level stand out. And we think because of that, this level is deserving of its A tier placement that we're gonna put it in, alongside Lone Wolf, which also was a really unique epilogue level for a Halo game game, we're also going to put that one at A tier too. Next, we're going to go ahead and jump into Halo Combat Evolved. And Combat Evolved is definitely one of the hardest games we have whenever we're just trying to do any type of ranking where we compare it against other games, because obviously it was different for the time that it released. This is 2001. But when you go back and play Combat Evolved in 2020 against other Halo games, you do start to pick favorites and least favorites you experience along the way. Right away, Pillar of Autumn still is a great level that holds up all these years later. We can jump into a game and play through Pillar of Autumn, and it really not only served as a great first level introduction to Halo, but it also was a great contrast to the types of levels and experiences you have once you finally get to the Halo ring in the second level and forward on. We think that contrast is not only cool, but also the level design and just the way you get to experience the Covenant for the first time if you were playing Halo all the way back in 2001 for the first time. We think that's awesome, and we think this is deserving of A tier. Next, we want to talk about the level Halo, which is such an awesome level because it is your first time being on the Halo ring, and it definitely is this experience getting to have that open world exploration, and that's awesome. However, while this did kind of let you go and explore and see some awesome locales, there is some repetitive nature when you play this level multiple times and you play through it correctly and you do all of the firefight holdouts to protect your Marines the way you're intended to. It does make this level drag on a little bit. We're not at all dissing this level, but we do think there's better levels in Combat Evolved than Halo, so we're going to put this one just at B tier. It's a good level nonetheless. Then we get to Truth and Reconciliation, and no matter how much we want to like this level, the outdoor section is beautiful. It's really fun to play through. It drags on way too much when you get into the second half of the level, which is this indoor, repetitive, going up levels, waiting around, walking through, trying to find keys. You finally find him, you have to walk through some more, wait around, get your own ride. We're just never really a fan. We're never looking forward to jumping into Truth and Reconciliation. So we are going to put this one down quite a bit at D tier here. But then on the contrary, we run into Silent Cartographer, which we think is the perfect example of Halo Combat Evolved. If you think of any single level that should define what Halo Combat Evolved was like, the Silent Cartographer is kind of this perfect example. You have this awesome beachhead fight right away, and then you're kind of left to your own accord. You can go through and explore the island however you feel with still some direction, or you can cut to the chase and go directly the direction you know is the right way and go that way as well. Not only do you have these open areas you can explore with a Warthog, but you also have these closer, tight-knit indoor corridors where you have combat that you have to kind of think strategically about. And we think that this level is just so well polished, it's deserving of S tier. Next, we're going into Assault on the Control Room. Now, this level also introduced a lot of really awesome things. It had a lot of different types of encounters you have. It has a really unique atmosphere, being this snowy level that has to keep the temperature down, which is interesting because it's kind of foreshadowing the existence of the flood. But honestly, this level is really, really long when you play through it. It just sometimes feels like there's a lot of going back and forth in this level, and then when you have to track all the way back through it in a later level, it can sometimes feel a little repetitive. Though there's some great things that work here, there's just a lot of really great atmosphere here, so we think it's fair to put this one down at B tier. Then we go into 343 Guilty Spark, which was a great introduction to the flood. The outdoor section is extremely gorgeous, and we do really like the creepiness factor that they put into introducing a brand new enemy class midway through a game. It was really cool, though there are some sections that have these long holdout times where you just kind of gotta wait for all the flood to clear out, and it can get a little bit annoying. So we're gonna put this one just safely at B tier. When we get to the library, we know that there's some people who really love this level, but also it's one that a lot of people really dislike. And since we're really more focusing on the Halo CE version before the Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary kind of changed up some of the textures to make it easier to navigate, we're just gonna put this one down at F tier for the first one in any Halo game so far. Honestly, this level just kind of missed the mark. It could have worked a little bit better had they maybe shortened it, but they decided to kind of add that extra level to it where you have to do everything again, and it just seems a little bit redundant. It earned the reputation that it has. We already talked about this one a little bit, but 2 Betrayals isn't as bad as we first often think when we jump back into this level. We often feel like we have to do this long backtracking part, and mentally this level feels like it's such a long level to have to go back through, but honestly with the Banshees it's not that bad. Though there's nothing too special about having to travel backwards through this level, and it just seemed like it was filler here, and then you also fight the flood while you're at it. So it's not the worst level, not the best. We're gonna go ahead and put it at C tier. And then we get to Keys, which is essentially a large section of Truth and Reconciliation, except this time you have to fight the flood, which is even worse, but you're now going through the same tedious section you did from Truth and Reconciliation. Station. Honestly, we never are looking forward to this level, and we just wanted to get to the mall already. So we're gonna put this one down at D tier. And then we get to the mall, which does have some repetitive stuff from the first level, but since these levels were so spanned out or spread out between the course of Combat Evolved, it definitely feels more like, wow, look, we're back at the first level, rather than, oh look, we're back at the first level. And the flood kind of works well here. We do always run in trouble whenever we get to the part where we have to throw the grenades in the thing because we're bad at Halo. And then to top off Halo Combat Evolved, Bungie did something awesome and made this epic driving sequence at the end, which is just such a cool concept that hadn't really been done in any games up until this point. So we're gonna go ahead and put this one all the way up at A tier, thinking that it definitely deserves its spot on this list. Going on to Halo 2, it is really interesting to see how we think these levels compared to these other Halo games that we've looked at so far. Cairo Station is a very unpopular level for people who do lasso and legendary runs. However, for the most part, we actually really enjoy this level as that introduction to Halo 2. Not only is it a really interesting set piece that we think looks cooler than the Pillar of Autumn from Halo 1, but it kind of has this just epic feel to it and moment at the beginning we really appreciate it. This level definitely deserves A tier. Then following that up, having Outskirts where you're on Earth and the city is just really cool. I always really enjoyed exploring the rooftops of the early section of the level, and then the later area is still really fun. And this level is kind of a really great example of good level design because there's so many different ways you can approach this level, and there's a lot of different challenges along the way, like those darn jackal snipers. And then you can grab a vehicle later on in the level and just cruise on through those tunnels. It's a really great level and possibly one of the best levels of Halo 2, so we're putting this one all the way up at S tier. Now typically Metropolis and Outskirts kind of go together. The levels are back to back and they lead right into each other, though since they're technically separate levels, we do have to say we like the beginning level a little bit better than the second part with Metropolis. Still, Metropolis has some really awesome stuff like the tank going across the bridge. There's some really cool tunnel sections. You get more of the newer side of the city and then a scarab fight at the end to top it all off. This level definitely deserves A tier. We run into another situation where typically the next two levels are also played back to back, but they are separate levels with the Arbiter and Oracle. And while we do love the character of the Arbiter and we do like his story, we do find these two levels a little bit more of a drag compared to the last three levels. It's just the aesthetic inside of the structure is a little bland, and fighting against the Heretic Covenant can be a little confusing, but it's not a bad level by any means, and it's definitely a fun level when it comes to Halo. It does drag on a little bit and feels really repetitive, and you kind of are ready to be done by the time you complete Oracle. So we're gonna go ahead and put the Arbiter at C and Oracle at B, because the cable cutting part and just kind of free falling for a second is really cool. Delta Halo is the next level, and this level is really interesting because it's the first time we set foot on this new Halo ring, and it's pretty cool to experience. You do have a decent enough level design and approach. Fighting the Covenant is fun, though it doesn't have the same wow factor you had when you first landed on Halo in the previous game. Still, vehicle play is fun, and this level definitely gets a B. We definitely went into a debate when it came to talking about where we wanted to put Regret, because there are some cool things about this level, like the underwater elevator looks cool, but the amount of backtracking and just waiting around in this level really doesn't give it enough oomph to put it any higher than what we're going to put this one on our tier list. It honestly feels like this level ended up becoming a filler level to make the overall game longer rather than having more and unique content, and it is a shame because there is some really beautiful set pieces here, but the fact that you're just kind of stuck on these long gondola rides, then a long elevator ride, and you have to do it multiple times just to have a very uneventful and easy boss fight at the end, it doesn't really warrant it going any higher than D tier on this list. And then when we're talking about not as fun levels in Halo 2, we're also going to talk a little bit about Sacred Icon, as this level just feels like a very similar situation that happened with Regret, where it's a lot of just copy and pasted rooms with slight alterations as to what type of enemies and how you face off against the different types of enemies. Sure, this is something that Halo has done forever and they still do it in newer games, but Sacred Icon kind of feels like one of those examples where it's maybe not done as well as it could have been done just because it feels very repetitive through and through, so we're putting this one D tier as well. Quarantine Zone does pick things up a little bit as you have a little more open traversing available. You can use vehicles, though things can get really chaotic at times, and it is a fun vehicle level. It's just maybe not as great as other vehicle levels like Outskirts or Metropolis in the same game. We're gonna go ahead and bump it up a little bit and give it a C. Then we get to Gravemind, which is very difficult to rank here because it is iconic in its own ways. There's some really awesome things that Gravemind did. It is really cool to be on High Charity, and it's cool to fight your way through that, and you see all of these different things going on like the Civil War, and you have to rescue Marines sections, but this level is really long for the same reasons that levels like Sacred Icon are really long. There's a lot of copy and pasted sections that seem to just be stretching the game out rather than providing unique content. Now, the whole Civil War stuff that goes on is really cool, and this level definitely had potential to be one of the highlights and coolest moments of Halo 2, but it does fall a little bit short when you are trying to compare this level to every other level in all of Halo existence. So while it does have its awesome features about it, which are the main redeeming factor, we think it's just a middle of the road level at the end of the day, and we're putting it at C tier. Then Halo 2 picks things up again for sure though in the final arc. In Uprising, the level is fun, it's upbeat, it's fast, there's driving, there's vehicles, there's indoor sections, and it's kind of this more classic Halo feel that we love to play, so we're giving this one a B. High Charity continues on from where we were in Gravemind, but it does step things up a little bit, and not enough people actually appreciate High Charity. They usually talk about Gravemind the most, but High Charity is actually a little more fun, it's a little more to the point, and this one we're gonna go ahead and put at B tier. And then Just Okay Journey, and while typically we are fans of Halo games ending in some sort of epic driving sequence like we have in Halo 1 and in Halo 3, Halo 2 kind of did things differently, having you end the story with the Arbiter and this boss fight against Tartarus. But the journey to the boss fight and the teaming up with Sergeant Johnson and defending the Scarab and getting to drive things like the Spectre or the Wraith or whatever you feel like driving is pretty cool, and we appreciate this level quite a bit. We're gonna go ahead and put it in at A tier. Then we're going on to Halo 3, and this one will probably be just as controversial as the Halo 2 one, but maybe for the opposite reasons, because we might have a bias towards Halo 3 just because we really like Halo 3. We think Halo 3 is one of the best Halo games, but we tried to be as fair as possible, but of course this is based off of our own opinions, so you can't fault us too badly. Sierra 117 serves as an okay enough introduction to Halo 3. It is fun to run around and just kind of fight your way through it, and the way they pace out the enemies along the way is actually pretty balanced, and you get to experience the brutes as the main enemy in a Halo game for the first time in this regard. So we're gonna go ahead and put this one at B. Things do drastically slow down though when you get to the level Crow's Nest, which is essentially a worse version of Sierra 117 if you think about it. It's just walking through corridors and then open areas, except Crow's Nest has you going back and forth multiple times. Essentially, you have to make your way back and forth through the level 3 times just to complete it, and it is really repetitive. I don't think there's anyone out there who just loves Crow's Nest and is like, this is the best level that Halo has ever done. It's just kind of meh. There's nothing terrible about it, but it's definitely not the most exciting level, so we're just gonna put it down at D tier. Things do pick up quite a bit when we get around to Savo Highway, which is definitely a fun open map and really shows off how Bungie was able to utilize a lot more of an open space with Halo 3 while still drawing inspiration from driving levels in the past that had been successful. And Savo Highway executes this extremely well. It's a lot of fun to play through, and we're putting this one up at A tier. Then similarly, we have the Storm, which is really cool because it takes the same idea of having open sandboxes and battlegrounds, but also has these linear sections that connect them together. And then we get introduced to a Scarab for the first time since Halo 2, but this time we don't have that bridge advantage that you have in Halo 2, and you have to actually find a way to take out the Scarab on your own. Now there's a lot of different ways to take the Scarab out, but it was really cool how you're just kind of left at your own accord to take the Scarab out, and you don't necessarily have as much guidance, or there's not as much of a straightforward way to take the Scarab out in this one, and it's pretty awesome, and we really like the level The Storm, so we're giving this one an A tier listing as well. Then we get to Floodgate, one of the most controversial levels in Halo 3. Everyone seems to hate this level because it reuses some of the assets from the Storm, you fight against the Flood, and we absolutely love this level for whatever reason. I think for the most part it's the atmosphere and just this really uneasy and creepy setting, and it's one of those levels that backtracking actually has this advantage, as we were just here at a different time of day and now everything's darker and creepier, and we get to see the real threat that the Flood has on humanity and how they just take over stuff so quickly. It kind of took this open map that had these linear sections in between and turned it into a more linear play and introduction to the Flood, and we really appreciate it. This level is really short, but we're actually putting this one up at S tier in our opinion because it just has such a unique atmosphere, and it's definitely extremely underrated. But we actually wish there were more levels like this in the grand scheme of Halo, just because of how unique this one stands out opposed to all the other Halo games. Next we get to the Ark, which is a fan favorite Halo level. It's a pretty fun level. There's a lot of different sections to it, with the sniping section at the beginning, the driving sections throughout, and then you face off against the Scarab, then you go indoors, course, you do some corridor stuff and fight off against some brutes at the end. This level's definitely loaded with a lot of things to do in it, and it is pretty fun for the most part, and it's a great example of Halo 3's sandbox once again, which is of course important. But we did debate as to where to put this one, and it really came close to going up to A tier, but when it comes down to comparing the wide open levels of this game and the open sandbox levels, there's better levels in Halo 3, like Savo Highway and the one we're going to talk about next, so we're going to go ahead and put this one at B tier. Next was the Covenant, and this was the level that we decided to put in at A tier, just because it has a lot of the similar elements that the Ark had, with having this open level design that you can approach in various different ways, but it definitely feels like the encounters you have along the way are a little more varied than what you have in the Ark, and the stakes feel a lot higher on the Covenant as you're finally once and for all defeating the Covenant, which is really cool. But having the different types of scenarios where you're facing off against an AA Wraith, then you go inside to take out the first tower, then you drive back, you get a Hornet flying section, the Flood randomly shows up, then all of a sudden you're in a tank, and then there's some Scarabs that drop in, but you can use a Hornet or a tank to take out the Scarabs, and then you defeat the Covenant by teaming up with the Flood once and for all, and then the Flood turns on you. There's a lot going on in this level, and it's pretty awesome, so this one deserves A tier. And then Cortana, which is another Flood focused level, has you back up on High Charity, and we're still really not that big of fans of this level. Now, we do think that the Flood was programmed a lot better in Halo 3, and they are more fun to encounter, though the design and aesthetic that went into Cortana just doesn't necessarily feel as interesting or exciting as the rest of the game. We've talked about this level before in the past. It would have been really cool to see some landmarks that we could recognize from when we were on High Charity in Halo 2, just to make the aesthetic seem more like a revisit of an old place, but honestly, it's just completely unrecognizable by the design with the Flood there, which makes sense, but even the remaining Covenant architecture looks slightly different to match Halo 3's art style, and there's just nothing exciting or special about this level, especially when you look at what levels had just come before it. We're gonna go ahead and put it at D tier. It's not a failure of a level, but it's still just kind of meh. And then you get Halo from Halo 3, which is such an amazing level in our opinion. I know some people don't like this level for some reason. I completely disagree. I think the fact that they literally revisit a Halo control room and kind of have these parallels drawn between the older levels like Assault on the Control Room and then this Halo game, it's a really cool way to revisit an old location, similar to kind of what we were just saying about what they should have done with Cortana, and then they kind of do some other interesting things. The main boss is 343 Guilty Spark. We see a major character sacrifice, and the fact that you fight against Guilty Spark is kind of a cool callback to Halo 1 as well, and essentially they give you this feeling of triumph where you actually finish the fight, but you have one of the most exciting escape sequences in video game history. I don't know if there's any other video game that has completely captured this feeling of excitement when you're driving off this Halo ring trying to escape while everything else is just blowing up around you, and the soundtrack is just full blast Halo, and it's such a cool level. This level single-handedly probably was responsible for me actually getting into Halo and falling in love with it, just because never have I ever experienced something with just this same caliber. And yeah, other games do have great exciting escape moments, but this one's just on another level, and this level easily gets S tier. Going on to Halo 3 ODST, Mombasa Streets is probably one of the more controversial ones that we have opinions on here, but for Mombasa Streets, this is the only one we're going to put in this in particular ranking. We're going to give it both S tier and F tier at the same time. I know that sounds really weird. It doesn't make sense to what we're doing in this list, but hear us out. We really appreciate the atmosphere and ambiance that Mombasa Streets provides, and it's such a cool and unique experience the first time you experience the level, and you're just walking through the streets trying to put together the pieces of what happened in ODST. It's a unique experience that is just so cool the first time you do it, and then every other time you come back to Mombasa Streets, this level is an absolute slog, and it just breaks up ODST and makes it such a long and drawn out game. It's no longer this unraveling mystery. It's kind of like a living, breathing cutscene in one way or another, and it feels like over-the-top backtracking. So yes, we do appreciate Mombasa Streets for what it was the first time we played through it, though on repeat repeated playthroughs, we try to avoid this level if possible. Tre Plaza, on the other hand, is a short level, but it actually is pretty linear and action-packed all the way through. We pretty much enjoy this one quite a bit, so we're putting this one in at B tier. Uplift Reserve is a great fun level in ODST and possibly one of the best driving levels in all of Halo. Seems like it took a lot of the inspiration from Savo Highway in Halo 3 and just made it even better, more linear, and just it's really fun to go through. So we're going to put this one up at S tier for Halo 3 ODST. Kazingo Boulevard, on the other hand, it's okay. It's a good tank level. It's decent enough, but there are some parts that just feel unnecessarily drawn out. So we're going to put this one at C tier. When we get to Oni, we're going to go ahead and put this one in at B tier. It's actually varied enough that we appreciate it, where you have the section outside and you get to see the big building and the different types of waves that the enemies bring at you where you kind of have to fall back. It's kind of cool and unique and we really like it. Plus blowing up the bridge at the beginning's awesome. Then NMPD was a really unique level. It was cool to have these rooftop runs, just kind of a completely different perspective than what we typically saw in ODST, with a lot of the areas kind of being reused between Mombasa Streets and the main campaign. It was a cool, varied level, and the firefight at the end is so epic, and it's kind of a shame they didn't turn that into some sort of aerial firefight mode, but obviously they probably didn't have time for that. So it deserves its place in at A tier. Kewanee Station, of course, has to at least get an A tier here, but this level is really fun. As far as Halo had been concerned, we hadn't really had any levels that were Banshee focused in more of the modern Halos at the time. So it was really cool how they incorporated the level and having sections in between where you had to drop out of the Banshee, go on foot, then get a Banshee again, and then the Scarab fight at the end that is completely optional, but still really cool. It did serve as a really epic kind of intro to the finale of the game, which we really appreciated. Plus, stealing a Phantom, like just commandeering it to escape the city, just kind of added all this extra stakes and this underdog type situation in the game. So we love Kewanee Station. Data Hive is actually probably one of Rookie's best levels, and while some of the sections do feel a little repetitive as some parts are copy and pasted, the atmosphere here and just going underground, there's kind of this weird stuff going on with this random security guard, and then you meet up with Dare. You have to go deep into this underground area to go get Virgil, and Virgil is one of the best Halo characters of all time. So we're gonna go ahead and put this one at B tier. And then when we get to Coastal Highway, this level is a lot of fun. And if we kind of are comparing all of the last levels from Halo in their own regard, this one's also kind of top tier here. It might not be as exciting as Halo from Halo 3, but it is still really upbeat and kind of follows the same theme we're talking about with the end of ODST, just having these stakes that are constantly being upped. Plus, going for that deja vu achievement where you have the mongooses is really fun as well. So it deserves its place in at A tier. Oh boy, it's time for some Halo 4 talk, and actually we tried to be as fair as possible when it came to Halo 4 and Halo 5, but since this is our own tier list, we also had to be completely honest with our opinions here. So let's go ahead and look at Halo 4 comparatively to the rest of these Halo games. Okay, so first things first, Dawn takes place right where kind of you would expect a next Halo game with Master Chief to take place after Halo 3. For the most part, this level is actually really cool. Like, this is the level that really should have set the stage and should have been the ongoing pacing for Halo 4, because we absolutely love Dawn. It's such a cool level to go through the remnants of Forward Unto Dawn. Sure, there's a few things that don't really make sense, like why the BR looks so different when in Halo 3 it was, you know, but art style stuff aside, it is still a really cool introduction to the game. They have this kind of mystery presented, the story is paced well enough here, and just stuff starts to hit the fan really quickly, and you kind of get to that giant mystery planet that we saw at the end of Halo 3 as the introduction to Halo 4, and it just leaves you wondering what's ahead when you finally crash down on Requiem. So we're gonna go ahead and put Dawn up in A tier for Halo 4. Then we get to Requiem, and we really do not like this level. Honestly, there was some potential here, maybe with how they handled some of the skyboxes in the background, but when you play through this level, there's really nothing unique here, and it just feels underutilized. It just feels like you're going point A to point B. There's nothing special or new, and there's just really nothing unique about this level that makes it stand out, and it's just a level you want to get through so you can get through it. So we're putting this one down at F tier, actually. The next level, Forerunner, does bode a little bit better. There is definitely repetitive early on, which does hurt it quite a bit, but it did have that epic ghost run at the end, which was really cool. So we're gonna go ahead and let it slide a little bit and give it C tier for this video. Infinity is another one of those levels that just felt like a drag of a level that just goes on for forever. They probably could have broken this level up into multiple levels, but this is definitely one of those levels that feels like it drags on way too long compared to other Halo games. It maybe falls into some of the things that weren't so great about the first Halo game that maybe they were trying to recreate. I don't know. It just feels really off. It feels like there's just so many different places you go in this one level that when you're running back through it just to play through a single level, it just feels like it's a drag. It does introduce players to the Mantis, which is kind of cool, but if you're playing in co-op mode, just one person gets to use the Mantis through the whole Mantis walking section and everyone else just gets to watch until the end. I don't know. They could have done a lot of cooler things with this level that they just did not choose to do. So we're gonna go ahead and put this one down at D tier. Going to Reclaimer, things do a little bit better, as having that giant mammoth thing was kind of cool. This level is a little more linear in stakes, and there's definitely some big open vehicle combat sections that are kind of fun, though this level also has a little bit of a drag at the end where you just kind of got to do all this unnecessary extra stuff before going back to the main focus of the level. So we're gonna go and put this one just kind of middle of the road at C tier. Shutdown. What a disappointing level for a level that finally lets players, after all of these years, use a pelican as a main part of the level, and they just completely underutilized it. It's literally just a glorified flying Uber where you just go from point A to point B and you don't really have any other use for the pelican. Then when you're inside, it's just some gondola rides, a lot of over-the-top fighting, which isn't exciting in any way or different from anything we experienced. And whenever we do play through Shutdown, we usually use a skip that one of our friends found that lets us just bypass this whole level so we don't have to actually play through it. And that should speak enough for this level. We're putting it down at F tier. Composer is kind of interesting, as we have a little bit of a new atmosphere for the level, and they did do some interesting things with the story and the cutscenes, though we're not trying to weigh the story too heavily in this tier ranking, though we kind of like how they kind of refined things a little bit in this level and made it a little more straightforward, but still had a lot of varied action along the way. There's some cool stuff in this level, and at least you are seeing some sort of a different atmosphere outside of just what we had saw when on Requiem. So we're gonna put this one at C tier, and then lastly we can go to the level Midnight, which is the last level of Halo 4, and actually this is one of the biggest redeeming qualities out of Halo 4, is just the way that this final level was handled. They did something unique and new and have you do this flying thing at the beginning, and it's a little chaotic at times, yes, and sometimes things will just kill you for no reason, but conceptually here it's decent enough. There is a little section towards the end where you have to fight a bunch of Prometheans, and of course the Prometheans aren't the most fun to fight in Halo 4, but it doesn't really ruin anything too much. And then you kind of have this final cutscene interaction, which is a little awkward at times, but it's epic enough and it leads to a good enough ending for Halo 4 that could redeem some of the flaws with the middle section of this game just being kind of garbage. So we're gonna go ahead and put Midnight at B tier. And then we get to Halo 5, and if you thought we were too hard on Halo 4, well, yikes. Okay, first and foremost we have Osiris, which is the introduction to Halo 5, and also we play as these new characters, and boy was this something else. I remember seeing the trailer for Halo 5 and that cutscene that plays where you see all this action just happening at this high speed, and yeah, it's a cutscene that plays in the game. You don't actually get to experience some of the epic moments you see in the trailer and in the cutscene. It just shows you in a cutscene instead, and that's a good way to kind of theme out what happens in Halo 5. It's a lot of watching cutscenes that are cool and not actually experiencing the coolest things. And once you actually get into the level to play, it's not really unique, and there's nothing different about Halo 5 other than maybe the mechanics that Halo 5 introduced to really set it aside from any other Halo game's first level. And then to top it off, they kill the main villain from Spartan Ops that had all of this hype built up through the Spartan Ops thing just for him to die off right away in a cutscene. So Osiris is going to be at D tier for this list. Then we go to Blue Team, and there is some cool things here. Being on the Oni research station is kind of cool. This level works well enough as you kind of have a little bit of an open area, but there's still a linear enough playthrough. Then there's some Banshee stuff at the end, which is kind of cool, but there's nothing special here either. So we're gonna go ahead and put it at C tier. And moving forward with Halo 5 Guardians, it's just gonna be a bunch of just mediocre levels. When it comes down to it, Halo 5 Guardians really wasn't all that exciting to play through. There's nothing unique throughout the rest of this game that jumps out and is memorable enough where you're like, yes, I want to go back and play through Halo 5 Guardians just to experience that level. So when we look at a level like Glass, the next level, yeah, there's some interesting things seeing the glass planet and driving around on it, but is there anything really interesting or fun about the gameplay here? Not really. So we're going to put this one at C tier. Then we get to Meridian Station, which is one of those levels that is just kind of a walk around level and you don't really do anything. It's not even a real level really, so we're putting it at F tier. And then Unconfirmed, we have the epic face-off in this level between Master Chief and Locke that happens in a cutscene. And Locke punches Master Chief. It's kind of dumb. The level itself isn't that interesting, so we're putting it at D tier here. We get to Evacuation, which is the level with the space elevator, and there's some backtracking here, and it's kind of boring, so we're putting this one down at D tier as well. When you get to Reunion, things do kind of change pace, and things are starting to look up a little bit, but it's not really enough to kind of make this level stand out. It's pretty repetitive. The Phantom part's okay, but it's kind of short and doesn't really matter, so we're keeping this one at D tier, though when we get to Swords of St. Helios, there is a little bit of an improvement here, as at the very least, the temples look pretty cool, and St. Helios is kind of a cool level. The atmosphere here is okay, but the gameplay's still not that great. So we're putting this one up at C tier. Alliance is another one of those levels where you walk around and do absolutely nothing. So easily it's going to be at F tier. We get to enemy lines. Once again, it's more of the same stuff we've experienced through Halo 5 Guardians already, which is weird because the game's already stale at this point and we're kind of just over the halfway point. Though it did the Kraken thing, which is kind of cool, though the Kraken thing kind of feels just like the same experiences we had with the Scarab in Halo 3 or that other weird thing in Halo 4. It's honestly just a repeat of things we've already done in Halo. So we're gonna go ahead and put this one at C tier. Then we get to Before the Storm, and they thought, why not throw another walking level in here? Because we love those levels. F tier. When we get to Battle of Sinayon, at the very least, the city looks cool. The action is a little bit more intense. There's a little bit more of an exciting moment here and there. So we can give it a C tier at least here, but it's nothing too special. When you get to Genesis, the only thing that's kind of memorable here is when you get to the Guardian part where you're running down the Guardian, and other than that, it's kind of meh. And even running down the Guardian part, while it's conceptually cool, there's nothing really that special about it. It would have been cool if they made it maybe longer or made it more exciting, so we're gonna just put it here at D tier. And then we get to The Breaking, where you have to fight 3 wardens, and honestly, they're not that cool to fight after you've already fought and experienced fighting against the wardens already, which kind of makes it feel like it's pretty underwhelming that you're just fighting more of the same thing. We're gonna put this one at D tier. And then we get to Guardians, which is actually easily, after looking through all of the levels of Halo so far, the worst final level in any Halo game ever. Like, this is so bad because there's just nothing here. There's no substance, there's no excitement, there's just kind of this first-person cutscene that you crawl up at the end, and that's it, and just some firefights in between. There's just nothing that feels like the stakes and build up of everything you've done so far has any form of payoff, and that easily puts this one at F tier as far as we're concerned. Okay, so that's our opinion. Sorry if you really are a huge fan of Halo 4 and 5, but it's our opinion. You can tell us what you think in the comments down below. We also know that you probably disagree with a lot of our choices along the way from various Halo levels. We'd love to hear what you guys think. But hey, after all of that, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos just like this one, and you won't miss anything we upload, even if YouTube's acting all whack. Also, if you want to, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Rocket Elijah, or you can follow Luke at Rocket Sloth Luke. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video. Bye, guys.